We're doing something a little different for this episode. Welcome to Clarifying COVID-19 Podcast Edition. This one is for those of you who prefer to get your information through audio while you're driving, cleaning, or just taking a break for the day. And as we near the end of our series, today we'll be talking about a topic that comes up nearly every day as we hope for the end of this pandemic: vaccines. Here to tell us all about vaccines is our guest and your usual host, my friend Shahid.
Hello again. Where should we start, Karen?
Well, let's start with the basics. What are vaccines?
Vaccines are medical injections that expose our bodies to dead or inactive versions of viruses or pathogens in order to build immunity or antibodies for the said illness without suffering from it.
Is there a difference between an immunization and a vaccine?
Technically, no. Although immunity is built through vaccinations, the general idea of getting a vaccine and getting an immunization are interchangeable linguistically.
And just to clarify, getting a vaccine means putting some version of the virus or disease into my body. Is there any danger there?
Well, that's actually the whole point of a vaccine, to put a mild and non-deadly version of the disease into our bodies so that our body can build immunity to it without being exposed to the more severe illness. This allows us to fight off the more deadly version with ease as we have antibodies and an immune response ready for it.
And that's worked out pretty well in terms of protecting our societies from highly contagious diseases so far. So what exactly is going on with this growing community of people who reject the idea of getting vaccinated?
Yes, we can't talk about vaccines without talking about the anti-vax community. An anti-vaxxer is a person who doesn't believe in vaccinating their child or believes that they should not be vaccinating their child until a certain age. The reason for refraining from vaccinating their child comes from the idea that vaccinations are linked to autism and other intellectual disabilities. Most of this stems from now debunked study by Andrew Wakefield in 1998, which linked the MMR vaccine to autism in children. The paper has since been scrutinized and marked as fraudulent by the scientific community countless times, but the harmful myths persist to the current day. The article sparked anti-vax groups, but there has been absolutely no evidence to prove that this hypothesis was factual. Anti-vax groups also credit concerns about mercury levels in their movement. Long story short, children had more mercury in their system than average in 1997, which led to the FDA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the Public Health Service to demand regulation and removal of mercury from vaccines. A misinterpretation of this action led people to believe that mercury in vaccines caused autism, even though there is no evidence to link vaccines to autism or mercury poisoning.
I think at this point, it's important to talk about a related but completely separate issue that is specific to the American public: a widespread community distrust of vaccines in certain minority communities. Some communities may not believe in the aforementioned anti-vaxxers' evidence, but have distrust in America's medical institutions due to years of mistreatment and a historical lack of proper care to their communities.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. I can definitely elaborate on this. A prominent example is within Black communities where there are significant lingering traumas of the Tuskegee experiments, in which Black men were unknowingly given syphilis by medical providers who sought to find treatments for the disease by watching how it affected the men and their families. Under the idea that there were extreme biological differences between certain races, these scientists thought that the primitive and underdeveloped would not be affected by the later effects syphilis has on the central nervous system. This racist and harmful experiment went on for 40 years, concluding in the 70s, which is very recent in history. Even without this in mind, many communities, particularly Black and brown communities, do not receive the same standard of care as their white counterparts. This is known as a health disparity. For instance, Black and Latinx women are more likely to die during childbirth than other races. Due to these shortcomings in our society, it is of no surprise many people find it hard to trust medical professionals. Worse so, the decision to ignore or refuse medical attention only hurts the community who need it most. By not receiving vaccines or other medical services, these communities put themselves at more risk for disease and injury. This also keeps medical professionals from learning about these disparities and understanding how to work with the communities in need. It is imperative that the American institutions that continue to benefit off of this historically oppressive system are held accountable. Only then can we repair the trust between Black and brown communities in the healthcare system and allow everyone to get vaccinated and receive proper medical attention. More and more health professionals are educated on these disparities and how to work with diverse populations. And although no one can promise perfect healthcare from whoever you see, it is vital to do what you can to care for and protect you and your loved ones. According to most of Fauci's statements, if 75 to 85% of America isn't vaccinated, it defeats the purpose. So although trust may not be very high for the vaccines made for corona, we can assure that they will be thoroughly tested over 3 phases of pharmaceutical checkpoints before they ever reach the public.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Dr. Anthony Fauci's statements on the process of creating the vaccine for COVID-19, this is the latest thing we've heard from him.
Well, we do not know how effective it is, and that's the entire purpose of doing a phase 3 trial. Two particular candidates started in a phase 3 trial last week on July 27th. It will take about 3 months to enroll them, about 30,000 people in the trial. 15,000 will get the vaccine and 15,000 will get placebo. The critical issue is that we don't know if it's safe and effective now, and that's the reason why you do the clinical trial. And we hope, and I'm pretty confident that this will be able to, I would say by the end of the year, which I've been saying, we will know whether it's safe and effective. We're cautiously optimistic that it will be, because the earliest studies that we did in the phase 1 showed that in a limited number of people, that it induced the kind of response, namely a good neutralizing antibody response, which is the gold standard of the thing you would expect would protect you. It induces it at levels that are equivalent to, if not even better, than what happens when you recover from natural infection.
Could you tell us a little more about what he means when he talks about the various trial phases for the corona vaccine?
Yes. The vaccine for COVID-19, as well as all vaccines, must go through 3 phases in order to be deemed safe for public use. Well, first there's preclinical testing, in which scientists must test the vaccine on animals, such as mice or monkeys, in order to see if they have an immune response. Phase 1 safety trials are when a small number of people are given the vaccine in order to see if they have an immune response or any other unwanted response. The immune response is also measured in these volunteers. Then we have phase 2, which is expanded trials, where scientists give the vaccine to hundreds of people split into 2 groups, including elderly and children. This further tests the vaccine's safety and the ability to stimulate the immune response, which brings us to phase 3, which is the efficacy trials, where thousands of volunteers are given the vaccine, and then they wait and see how many people are infected by the coronavirus compared to volunteers given a placebo. This tests the efficacy of the vaccine to protect against the virus. Lastly, there's the approval stage, in which regulators in each country review the trial results and decide whether to approve the vaccine.
And this process usually takes a very long time, years longer than what we're seeing with the coronavirus. How are we able to go through all of these phases of vaccine testing within a year?
Well, in the US, we have implemented Operation Warp Speed, a project in which our government will be naming 4 to 5 vaccine candidates and giving them billions of funding to speed up the process. Combined phases is another way to speed up the process, and in this case, phases 1 and 2 will be allowed to be conducted simultaneously.
Are there any promising top contenders for a COVID-19 vaccine?
Well, there are more than 165 vaccines for the coronavirus ready to enter production or in early phases.
Wow.
Currently, 27 vaccine candidates are on human trials. In the US, at least 1 genetic vaccines, or vaccines that utilize genetic material of the virus in order to trigger an immune response, are progressing the fastest. Moderna already has a vaccine candidate which entered phase 3 of trials on July 27th. Pfizer is expected to enter the 3rd phase soon and has been given $1.9 billion from the Trump administration to guarantee 100 million doses by the end of December. We'll see how these go soon, I guess. There's also been a lot of progress outside of the US, especially with Chinese companies Sinopharm and Sinovac. I won't describe each of the candidates right now, but for more information on how each of these vaccine candidates are working and their respective scientific methods, listeners can refer to the link in our description.
That sounds promising. And yes, all of the notes for this episode will be linked in the description below for those who want to read more about it. Before we conclude, though, can we touch a little bit about the myths of COVID-19, specifically with regard to prevention and cures?
Oh, yes. I'd like to conclude by saying that a vaccine is the most effective and probably most available option when it comes to ending this pandemic. Do not ingest or inject bleach or disinfectants into your body. There's been a lot of unproven information on certain medications, such as hydroxychloroquine or other at-home remedies to prevent the coronavirus, and none of these have actually shown positive results in the scientific studies. As of now, it is very important to stay away from do-it-yourself solutions, even if they are recommended by the president. And call your doctor first.
Yes, absolutely. The other day, my mom told me that kimchi kills the virus, so there are definitely a lot of ideas floating out there. I think we should leave it at that and just reemphasize vaccines are very effective. Everyone should get vaccinated. And until then, wearing masks and social distancing is also extremely important.
I'd also like to make a final note on the efficacy of vaccines, in that we have no idea how long these vaccines may give us immunity, and it is very possible that these vaccines may not leave us immune for life, in which case it may become another yearly shot like the flu. We really don't have enough information right now, but regardless, if not enough people get vaccinated, it will do us no good. Times are tough and very uncertain, but as of now, we have three strong contenders for effective vaccines that we can look forward to. So let's end on a hopeful mood today.
Thank you, as always, for your time and knowledge, Shahid. And with that, this concludes this episode of Clarifying COVID-19. Please practice social distancing, please wear your masks, and wash your hands.